you can do it. I mean, you can deliver on that.
Yeah, I know. It's a truly exciting place to be. It's certainly differentiated as well.
Great.
Yeah, good. So what we were going to talk about was identity and the threats to identity, and elements of meaning, I think, as well. Is that good for you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I'm really quite excited about this. I think there's certainly a common theme, but for me, it's a great opportunity to regroup once every couple of weeks and spend some time with you as well. And so I find this helpful. So great. So over to you, Paul. What's your take on identity?
Well, I think identity, I recently did some work with my dear coach, Alison Task, on narrative identity. And narrative identity, which, I mean, you know me, I'm a fairly, I wouldn't try, I wouldn't try and bamboozle you, Tom. But if you were, if you were an advertising in CEO, then the project we've just been through, I might have pitched to you as an exercise in narrative identity, and I could have fluffed it up a lot more, because narrative identity is really the story you tell yourself about yourself. Okay. And it works on the basis that you can't act outside your identity. Now, the most compelling example of this that I can give from my own personal experience is when I got, when I got into AA and was trying to get sober, I'd never heard the word recovery before, but recovery just seemed like a really, really cool thing to me. It just sounded cool. And I have this internal dialogue within myself, and it's the kind of dialogue I use in prayer a lot, and it's quite childish, and it's quite, and if I'm speaking to myself, I use a funny tone of voice, and I've got my own little vernacular. And I used to think of myself as a drinking creature, and then I used to talk to myself about being a recovery creature. Specifically, I used to say, Pauline, now you're a good, healthful recovery creature. And it was just this silly little internal dialogue of myself. But recovery creature became part of my identity, because I've wandered, like you get so many people going into recovery, and some people get it, and they tend to be about 10% in the first year. And then it goes down to about 3 to 5% in 5 years that actually stay clean. And most don't, right? And it really comes down to those who actually do the steps and those who don't. But you can never figure out who. And I was like, why for me did it not appear to be that difficult? And I put it down to the fact that recovery was part of my identity. I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm a recovery creature, and this is what recovery creatures do. So for me, that sort of soldered the idea that identity is really, really important, and the idea that you can never act outside your identity. Now, I would say the other great thing that I'd like to talk to you about with identity is that about 6 Sundays ago, I was at a sermon, and Pastor Kirali's mentor was there. She's the supervisor for the whole region of C3 Church, including India. Yeah. And she said to me, I made some crack about being one of Satan's foot soldiers and working in advertising. And she laughed. She said, well, as I wrote in Kirali's book, the world wants to sell you an image. Christ wants to give you an identity. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. Because here's the thing. I am, as I was telling you, I was, the business school that I go to is obviously very secular, and it's a culture of self-invention. So it's this idea that you can, which is what's happening in our culture now. A culture of self-invention is a term that's used by Bishop Barron a lot. And it's the idea that you can be whatever you want to be. And, the CEO who really, really grates with me, she's always talking about how she wants to have this pink airplane. And it's like, really? Is that it? The be all that you want to have a big pink airplane? But the thing is, when you're a Christian, okay, you know that before outside time right? Because both time and space are creatures. God created those. So outside time and space, God came up with you. He's numbered the hairs on your head. He's dropped you into this incredible narrative. Okay, you're part of the story. When you read the Bible, all these people, right? There's a line in Hebrews that says there's a cloud of witnesses cheering us on, right? All the people that you've read in the Bible, if you're doing your bit, right, they're all up in heaven cheering you along. You know you're going to meet. You're part of this insane narrative that just goes into eternity.
Yeah.
Right. So that's identity. That's a really, really powerful identity. Now, you have access to that. I have access to that. Sadly, a lot of people have stepped away from that. And so what do people do? People try and make up their own identity. And, that's why, millennials are always looking for purpose in their job and meaning in their jobs. And that's why there's so much purpose-driven advertising, because they're trying to bolt purpose onto, onto the car that you drive, right? If you drive an electric car, then that means you're a good person because it's like, but here's the thing, Tom, identity is supposed to come from within you. It's not supposed to come from somewhere external.
Yeah.
And we're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Right. We should be looking in our hearts. And if we look in our hearts, we know that we're a fallen race, but fortunately we're loved because we're redeemed through Christ's blood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you haven't got that, then you're going to have to fake it somehow, and good luck. You might find if you don't have that, then ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to find an idol.
Yeah, no, totally. I think, I love that, Paul. I think, my starting point with this, I struggled, to be honest. I've been extraordinarily busy, but I've managed to switch my brain on. I've been thinking about this since last night.
But can I just put a bow in this? But but that's not to say, that we all sit here and say, okay, I'm a miserable sinner. I've been redeemed by Christ. That's it. That's not, we still have unique talents.
Yeah.
And so one part, like the project that you and I have just done.
Yeah.
It is important to sit down and say, okay, let's look at what I've done. Let's look at how that's meaningful. Let's look at how that can be packaged and delivered in the service of others. And let's put that forward in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. No, I think that's critical. Yeah. Because, that's where the rubber hits the road. So I think my starting point with this was, it's all about relationship. Jesus died on the cross for relationship. And I think that's really the line in the sand for everything. And I think people who don't appreciate that, and certainly for me, there was an itch I couldn't scratch, and I think unless we actually follow the first commandment, which is the crux of everything, which is to love God and love other people, then the question is, what do we love? And that then I think takes us down whichever route. And you've chosen your routes, Paul, which it's this route of self-fulfillment of some variety. And quite frankly, I think for passionate people, that becomes obsessive, and it can take you into some pretty dark places, which you will do all you can to justify to yourself. And I think a lot of the crutches that people have got around material goods, and I think you're right, people find identity through their material goods. So you buy Nike trainers versus Adidas, and it's some association between the two. And I've always liked buying cars, but I don't because of the engineering and the speed aspects, as opposed to necessarily the identity aspects. And most of my cars are covered in crap as well, interesting enough, because I've managed to wean myself off that particular drug I used to have, for example. I think as well, if we don't have that, you get what I describe as being rework, which is a route to get from, in your case, from the 12 steps back to recovery. And I think words do matter, and those words are probably very positive, but they're a route to somewhere as opposed to being part of your identity per se. So I think, the challenge with this is requires massive courage. It requires us to let go. It requires us to reach out to Jesus. It's only actually when we do that we find that completeness, and we find, despite our circumstances, a feeling of completeness. And actually, I challenged myself on this morning. Whilst I've got a number of serious challenges, I do feel I don't have that awful itch. And I think certainly when I ask non-Christians, do you feel like there's something missing in their lives? They always they always say yes. And I think to be honest, I think that's the wonder. I think then as well, it's then a question of Jesus said, "Don't bury your treasure," right? So I think it's then a question of getting on with it. And I think that's pretty simple, really. It's about the way we do things as much as what we do. We become obsessed with what we do, and but I think it's really about sharing that love, which is reciprocated with others, which is loving God, which is our reference, then reciprocating that love with others.
Right.
And I think it's then a question of overcoming fear, because fear is the antithesis to this. And certainly Christians should have no fear, because frankly, you've got the biggest lion on this planet behind you, which only needs to be let out of it. Jesus only needs to be let out of his cage.
Well, you mentioned challenges. Can I quickly share something with you?
Yeah, for sure.
So I was listening to Pastor Kirley recommended I read a book called Disciple by Phil Pringle. Phil Pringle set up C3 Church, 400 churches globally. And I have never liked, stop me if I've told you this, but I've never liked that idea, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm like, there's no way I like the idea of a yoke at all. But Phil Pringle, in his book, he wrote this, and it's quite beautiful. We can read it if you like, or I can photograph, screenshot it and send it to you. He said, here's the thing. He said, what you got to understand is that what you're yoked with Jesus, he's in the yoke next to you.
Yeah.
Now, one of the biggest things that I say to my sponsees about step 3 is I go, step 3 is great. You're doing life with God. He'll do the heavy lifting. Yeah. He'll do the hard work, and he'll let you take all the credit. Right. That's what I mean, my mantra. God will do the heavy lifting. So all of a sudden I go, wow, I didn't realize that's what it meant. And then I thought, well, is that what it's meant? Is that really what it's supposed to mean? Because that's great. Or is that just Phil's take on it? Now, look, Phil's got 400 churches. So, but anyway, I was on a Bible study with Sister Edmay from, the Jesus Matters girls, Beverly and Beatty. Oh, the girl. Anyway, Jesus Matters girls in New York. And I said, Sister Edmay, I go, this thing about, does it mean we're actually yoked with Christ? And she says, yes, that's absolutely what it means. Yeah. And then she said this. She said, because if you're not yoked with Christ, you're going to be yoked with something.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Yeah. So if something's feeling heavy, if something's pulling you down, ask yourself, what are you yoked to?
Yeah, because and also who do you turn to as well, Paul, in that situation? I think it's very easy to, and it's a habit. Who do we turn to? Do we turn to ourselves? Or do we turn to Christ? And I've experienced this very real in turnaround situations, which are the worst business situations, where I accept that most of the situation is out of my control. These are the things I can do. And I've actually even said to a finance director who was in tears and in bits in this particular situation, which is not uncommon. To say, look, we'll do this and we'll give the rest to God. But I think it's that Nehemiah story of, there's another person in the fire. So being chucked in a fire is about as bad as it gets. And I think but that's absolutely real. Bizarre though it is. So I think the other part of that, Paul, is also in terms of identity, it's about discovering ourselves inside out. So I made this comment about, the story of people who buried their treasure. Jesus does not want us to bury our treasure. And with this power we've got and this wonderful, it's actually freedom. So it's not a yoke to bolt us in. It's actually being free. And I think I genuinely, absolutely believe that Jesus wants us to go out, be ourselves, and to with his support, go and make it happen, whatever we decide to do. And I think the key part of that is new action. And the problem with if you don't have Jesus, you will be overwhelmed with fear. And the things that drive you are pride. And pride is the antithesis, because it prevents you from recognizing what you've done wrong. And you're trapped in this pretty awful situation. And of course, you know, you've got
Keeps you out of gratitude as well.
absolutely, yeah. You know, and giving. I mean, there's lots of tools. I mean, I drew this matrix of, you know, Jesus's answer to most problems. You know, they're like, you know, there's an answer that Jesus has got, which is dead straightforward to most things. And you know, and you know, I think the Bible certainly talks about more as being a curse. So this notion, if you go down one of those routes, Paul, we talked about originally, then there's no amount of those things that's going to satisfy you.
Yeah, enough is never enough. Yeah.
And this is the curse of more. And Jesus said, actually, you know, it's a gift from God to appreciate what you have. So, and I think that
it's like Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk has admitted he's depressed.
Yeah,
he admits it. Like, he's okay with it. He's like, you know, it's like, I thought I'd be happy. It's like Elon Musk.
I know. And yeah, absolutely, and that's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, this is very real. So if you ask Elon Musk, you know, do you think there's something missing in your life? You know, what do you think it is? No, that's exactly the sort of scenario, exactly. And I think the other thing I wanted to touch on, what actually makes this worse at the moment. So, and the whole identity politics thing is a disaster because it's fundamentally destroying the notion of identity in terms of male, female, the fundamental society, the fundamentals.
It's
male,
gender,
female,
ethnic group, sexual preference, and race.
Yeah, well, but the basic sexual, the basic support of male and female sexuality, right, together, and that notion, you know, and because all this other stuff undermines, you know, so it sounds great, but it's not. It's destroying the fabric of society. I think technology as well makes this a lot worse because people are drawn into negative things largely through technology, and I think they get caught in echo chambers, and this prevents people from stepping out and being themselves because they become fearful.
I heard something about technology that you'd really like today. So you've heard the expression, you'll like this. You've heard the expression that politics is downstream of culture.
Yeah.
Someone said culture is downstream from technology.
Okay, right,
you think about what happened to culture when the printing press came along.
Yeah.
And then you think about what happened to culture when radio came along.
Yeah.
Like that impact that had in Germany and in World War II. They had radio, right? So they could disseminate. All of a sudden, the propagandist was like, wow, we can control people. So technology is such a powerful amplifier that actually creates culture, that actually creates politics.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes back to what you're saying originally, which is around the words. You were using the word, your image and identity around recovery, which is quite a positive word, but absolutely the amplification of that, and actually what does it amplify? Absolutely. And I think that it's then the question of, have you got the courage to step out of your bubble and get clobbered for that? So I think the acid test for this is also bringing things out into the open. So we should be bringing things out in the open. Jesus said, bring things into the light. And of course, silence is deadly. And that's the reason why, in fact, David Allen told me to wind back the title of my book, The Evil in Silence. But that is absolutely, tragically what happens. And there's a lot of good people being silent. So I think my sort of parting shot on this, I think, without Jesus, you've got a lot of fear, and fear creates silence, and it traps people in their pride, which Jesus said, pride isn't the proud are an abomination. I think with Jesus, you do actually have freedom. This is the great lie about Christianity. Jesus wants us to be free. He wants us to do our stuff with his support in the yoke, and that is just an extraordinary place to be, and it's a very exciting journey. Because it makes it a lot easier because it acknowledges the stupidity of self-righteousness or all-knowingness that because we know so little. We talked a bit about this before, Paul, the notion of, we can carve out our destiny, but you look outside your window, outside my window, we know virtually nothing about anything. So that whole notion is quite ridiculous. And I think the other thing that Carl Jung said, which is, and he wasn't by any means a Christian, he said the privilege of a lifetime is to discover who you truly are. And I think that so in this journey with Christ, with this relationship with Christ, with the lion behind you, right, and in front of you, all around you, then this is a truly exciting journey. And I think that by taking new action without fear, with speaking up without fear, then we can discover who we are. And I do believe that's what good looks like. And this is what the notion that I talk about, which is the notion of the jazz band. And this is why I'm so passionate about the Winning Thinking program, because it gets people sort of close to that place in a practical business context, because it resets relationships, it changes the dialogue, and it creates that cohesive force. Because I think the other thing I would say is, whilst Jesus is the crux of this, actually, in loving other people, our identity is also defined by other people. The way other people see us is quite important, and what they tell us is quite important for forming our identity. Like these types of conversations, and who we associate. And there's that mantra of who do we associate with ourselves?
You are your five. That you are the 5 books, the last 5 books you read, and the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's an element to that as well. Yeah, brilliant. So that's been a really good conversation. Really enjoyed that. And so, what do you think, Paul? The things that we can do. What are the threats to our identity, as you see them? I shared tech and other such things, but how do you maintain your identity when faced with the barrage of stuff that you get faced with?
Well, I mean, I'm really fortunate in that I really enjoy listening to sermons, and I really enjoy, I'm in my Bible. So I'm listening and reading to the Bible every day. I listen to Joyce Meyer every day, which is a sermon and scripture. And I just love listening to that stuff on YouTube. So I stay in God's word.
Yeah.
I'm mostly listening to it and reading it. And that just keeps me grounded. As I'm sure I've said this to you before, it's like if you go, if you and I were to go to any AA meeting or any 12-step meeting anywhere in the world, at least someone in one meeting will say, oh, I heard exactly what I needed to hear today.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I think the same thing happens in any spiritual practice. If you're moving towards God, he will meet you where you are. And if you're seeking, you will get the answer. So that's basically what keeps me grounded.
Yeah.
And I can go to an AA meeting and say, my name is Paul, I'm an alcoholic, but really when I say that, I'm just saying, my name is Paul, I'm a sinner, right? And I know that about myself, and I don't feel bad about it. It is what it is, and it reinforces my idea that I need Jesus. And I was doing some reading today on the crucified mindset, because I was listening to a great book called Walking with God by John Eldridge, and it was just a journal. It's just his journal entries of a year of him walking with God. And he said, he said, I want to give my imagination to God. I want to, it's what you say. He said, I ask God for everything. St. Paul said, pray without ceasing. And it's like, ask God for everything. And, when early on, when you hear that, you go, really? It's just overwhelming. Now it's just easier if you do that. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's like the Einstein lion. It's like, okay, well, it'd be a lot easier if I asked the lion. The lion's a lot smarter than I am. I'll just ask the lion, and I mean, like something really crazy happened for me today. I was normally I don't listen to the videos that more automatically pop on YouTube, and I've been watching something with Jordan Peterson, and then Bishop Barron popped up on this sermon on Job, and I was sitting down to eat, and I was generally wanted to watch something a bit more entertaining, and I was like, you know what? No, I actually need to listen to this. So I listened to it, and it was really good. And then about half an hour later, a friend of mine's husband posted on Instagram that he had got cancer and was having to go in for some treatment. And this friend of mine has been really, really like a lot of very bad things that happened. And I was like, I just knew exactly what to do. I was just like, hey, suffering, you know, like a massive season of suffering. What else are you going to suggest than Job? Right. And it's just, and that's, you know, that when you're in your spiritual river, that's how life shapes up. Something happens and you know exactly what to say and what to recommend, and it all comes together.
Yeah.
If you stay close to God.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's bang on the money. I think it comes, I mean, we started off talking about what is it to be human. And I think, you know, your starting point is spirituality, which then leads on to emotional well-being, which then leads on to everything else. And I think, you know, we've got to acknowledge that we're spiritual machines. We're
not meant to live life without God.
Yeah, and we are designed to live with God. Living without God is a disaster. And you know, if anybody challenges that, I'm an engineer. You know, we're the most. If anybody thinks we are a machine in the true sense of the word, we're 95% water and 66% bacteria, right? And you wouldn't necessarily make a machine out of that. So I think, you know, I think we shouldn't underestimate the crisis as well, because for young people, and David Allen certainly is passionate about this, that coming through education increasingly, because of the things we're talking about, like technology and you know, postmodernism and things, you know, there's no Christianity there, and so therefore, when children who are trying to find themselves and discover themselves have no link, not to mention the you know, the appalling.
It's terrible. They're on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly, and they're totally bogged down with trivia and just totally addicted to that whole world.
Yeah, and the world's that big, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think the difficulty with that is that they don't know themselves. So if something really bad happens to them, they are completely and utterly lost, Paul. I think the other thing that can happen is without having this sense of identity, they grow up with a sort of without purpose, or they realize that the things they've been taught, you know, like Nike trainers or material goods or whatever they've felt has been the way to live their lives, are just utterly meaningless. And tragically, a good friend of mine was telling me about his 24-year-old nephew who took his own life recently because he reached a point in his life, he's living with his parents, hadn't got a clue what he wanted to do, wasn't really doing anything, you know, just in this world of nothingness and purposelessness. And that's what worries me. It really worries me. And, you know, as you say, you've got this window into the world, which is bloody addictive. I mean, that itself screws you up. So I think it's, we've got to feed the machine in the right way. And I think spiritual well-being is absolutely the starting place. But, you know, you've got to, you know, talk about unintended consequences. If people are not, you know, feeding their spiritual well-being in the way that you, and I'm pretty similar in what I do, probably not quite so rigorous maybe, but I totally understand what you're saying. You know, to start with spirituality, everything else builds upon that. Anything else is just a fabrication of bullshit, really. It's like building a house
because
on sand.
you know, when you get to our age, you realize that what you want more than anything else is peace of mind, and now we go full circle back to the yoke, and it's like, you know, when you're with Jesus, that's where it is. So, you know, you not only get serenity, but you get wisdom and you get guidance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, one of the things I love telling people about, I mean, I talk about it in recovery context, but it could just as be from a Christian point of view, is like, I need to know what to do when I don't know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And if you know what to do when you don't know what to do, then you're good.
Well, yeah, but I think it's simpler than that, because all we have is reality. And something happens to us, Paul. We like to think we've got control of our destiny when we haven't really. We might have a plan, but all we have is reality, and things happen. And the challenge is, how do we react to those things? You know, and you know, that's where Jesus comes in to give us a steer, provide us that wisdom, etc. So yeah, absolutely. Without it, it's just an absurdity to think how people are coping at the moment. I just don't.
Well, I don't know how they are. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I like a lot of my friends are Christians, and we're always saying that. It's like I got to meet a couple of people I hadn't met before in my business school, and the conversations always end, which is, I don't know how the muggles do this. I just don't know how they manage. I mean, especially now with COVID, with all of a sudden the answers aren't fast food and Uber Eats. Sorry, porn and Uber Eats. It's like, now we know that won't bring happiness.
I know. Well, it's interesting actually. I've just been in the boys' weekend with a whole raft of wealthy mates of mine, and it's interesting listening to their conversation, most of which I wasn't really very interested in. It was around a lot of material assets, doing up their houses and all that sort of crap, which is utterly meaningless. But I think that's a large part of the way people find their identity. And there was a juncture in this thing actually where I actually made a point, and I made the point about joy, and James in his book of the Bible said that there is actually no joy without difficulty. So it's independent of circumstances, and all of their circumstances was predicated, or what they talked about was predicated around, various boys' toys, or doing at the house, or some utter bullshit like that. At least I, at one point in my life, I was interested in cars, which I thought was moderately interesting. But I still am, but I've managed to get a bit more perspective on that, a bit like, what we all struggle with, alcohol or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, who was it that said the human heart is a factory for idols?
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, that goes back to, if we don't love God, what do we love, doesn't it? It just is a bloody free.
Yeah. If you're not yoked to Christ, what are you yoked to?
Yeah, it's disastrous. Yeah. It's beautiful. The other thing, I think it's beautifully simple as well. What we've talked about is a perspective of the way this manifests itself. It manifests it's in our lives practically. But I think that a lot of Christianity, I mean, Jesus died on the cross to have a relationship with us. And the first commandment, and he said nothing else really matters apart from this, more or less. That to love God and love other people. Nothing else matters. The rest of it, just get on, do your stuff. And actually that's a fantastic place, because if you show love for other people, what you forget is they're showing love for you, Paul, right? And that is a very good place to be. When we're all looking out for each other. And I've turned businesses around doing that. The best reward and recognition scheme was started off with everybody had to do X number of actions in a month for themselves or for their business unit, and said the following month, right, I want you to do an action for someone else, right, somewhere else in the team. And this completely, took the culture from, just being extremely successful to being beyond comprehension successful. It was wow, wild. Yeah. It was truly wild. And that's really when, that's really what good looks like. But when things get tough, of course, the human nature is to look after ourselves, which is a downward spiral, which is the reason why the Winning Thinking Program, chapter 1, is about showing love for each other and putting other people first, and just stepping into that place and beginning to understand what that looks like. Because a lot of this stuff is actually changing our habits as well. It's all very well talking about it, but we have to change our habits. Otherwise we get this weird disconnect, which is another strange place to be for anybody, if they're a Christian or not a Christian. So, no, really good.
I mean, I would just say one thing. It's like, it's like when you do put your faith in Christ, and when you do buy into the Christian, talking about identity, when you do buy into the Christian narrative, then you have supernatural powers. You have access to supernatural powers. One of the other things that I've been doing recently is I've got a sponsee in the UK who's been subject to quite a lot of demonic activity and curses. And I've been reading this great book called Pigs in the Parlor by, I think, Frank. I can't remember. If you're interested, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I got
and it's Oh, you got it. So it's a complete deliverance ministry, right? It's the whole thing. And that's right. We talked about it. And I was looking at sort of like what disturbs us a lot of the time can be related to the demonic. And if we look at those clusters and how they all work together, and I've looked at every single one of them, I've read at different times of my life, I've been subject to all manner of things. Yeah. And the ability to recognize that, yeah, and to be present and aware of the spiritual warfare that's going on around you, and, yeah, to be sensitive, and then to be able to do something about it, that's next level stuff.
I totally, yeah. And I do think it's subtle as well, because the devil is a deceiver, and I do think identity politics is absolutely demonic. It's ripping apart society. It's ripping apart institutions. It's redefining, the Bible. It's rejecting the Bible. You try speaking up about Christianity in a woke context, you will get the most unbelievably bad treatment. And I think we should acknowledge as well, what does this look like, right? The worst thing it looks like is silence, Paul, and no one's saying anything about it. And I think there's a lot of good people who are silent at the moment, which is so important to step out. And otherwise, the words will get what we deserve.
Well, that's why it's very heartening to see what's happening in Canada.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, and I just hope it. But my concern is that with this new generation that have been brought up, I think they, the question I've got in my mind, and I'm not sure about this, is how can they get off their tech to develop their skills to have these difficult discussions to make these things happen, because it takes a bloody lifetime to figure that one out. And I don't know if we look at where's their influence coming from, because you talked about you're defined by the last 5 books you've read. If your window to the world is this big and it's feeding you a very narrow narrative, stepping out of that is not conducive to developing skills to deal with difficult topics. Because
I'm spoiled because I know some great. I mean, the only kids I know are the kids in church, and the kids in church are great. We get on really well. They're great kids.
I know they
love their Bible. Well,
I see that. I totally. Well, I see that. I see my kids in church in exactly that same way, and absolutely delighted. And then I see my kids step out of that, Paul, into the rest of the world, and it's pretty awful because they've got a strong moral compass, right? And in some ways, it's an absolute nightmare having a strong moral compass, because it puts you right in the center of spiritual warfare. And you either have a choice to say, look, no, that's wrong, or you go along with it, which is very stressful. So knowingly doing stupid things is very, very tough on them. So I think, yeah, it's something, it's very, very difficult for Christian children, I think, in the big bad world. But in church, I'm so delighted the way my kids are so well rooted and they understand practically how Jesus works in their lives. It's just such
great. Well, that's a real blessing.
It is, yeah.
Children are like a quiver of arrows. But you've got 2 girls, right?
I've got 2 girls, yeah. So that's but yeah, there's a substantial challenge there. They really, I mean, this is the other great misconception, that Christians are wet. Jesus was not wet, but when you've got that spiritual discernment, it's very important to do something with it, and that's where the battle starts. Because this is a battle. Anyway, Paul, I've loved this. Any last comment or anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I have actually. I've been reading this great book called Faithfully Different by Natasha Crane, and what she says is quite remarkable. She sums up secular culture like this: feelings are the ultimate guide. Happiness is the ultimate goal. Judgment is the ultimate sin, and God is the ultimate option. It's, you know what I mean? It's like you can do it with God or without, and if you can have any time with God. It's, it's a spiritual pick and mix.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. No, I think that's, absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. Love it. Thank you very much, Paul. It's been great speaking to you again.
No worries, brother. Take care.
Have a good day. See you later.
Bye.